on the right account and get some good streaming and views, since I have a secondary account just for Patreon, and that's the one I was signed into. So, all right, so that should be the right account. Hopefully, as soon as anybody gets on, okay, we have good. I heard myself, so we have good sound. I'm not going to worry about a sound check from the viewers. Let's get started. All right, so let me get back over here to the work side here real quick. Now remember, everybody, there is a lag involved here, and it's not really a lag, but a buffering. So if I don't get to your question, or if I don't see it right away, then thanks, Ben. Then we'll be good. So we're going to take this piece of 5160 leaf spring and we're going to cut it up. Now we're going to forge this Bowie out of one piece, but that'll come here later. I want to get this thing processed and then in the forge, and then we can talk about the Bowie. So let's get this over here and start processing this. Now, I could have done this yesterday, but I was like, you know what? Let's just show it. Let's just show all this stuff, that the whole thing that goes into doing a blade here. All right, so this was a broken lead, and so I cut that broken end off, and you take basically your life into your own hands when you're playing with this repurposed material. You don't know why it was replaced. You don't know what exactly is wrong with it. Now, we're going to forge the bevels and everything into this, so I'm not going to need all of this. This is like 3 inches wide, right? I'm going to cut this in half, and the blade itself only has a blade height of like an inch and 3/4. And so having cut this in half, being at 3 inches, we're going to get about an inch and a half minus the kerf. We're going to have more than enough steel here since this is 3/8 of an inch thick. And we're looking at something to be right around 3/16. Quarter inch is a little bit big for a buoy, especially if we're gonna put such of a steep grind on it. So we're gonna take a lot of that thickness out just in the grind itself. Um, but I'm gonna forge a lot of the bevels and everything in, and most of this in. Now I'm probably gonna run two at a time. We're gonna do two. Might as well do two since we're live, and we can, you know, make one a different style of, handle everything. We may go for the straight coffin handle and everything, scales, all that shit. We'll talk about Jim Bowie's buoy that he's known for, and then the actual Jim's knife that he used when he was knife fighting. So there is a big difference. We're also we're also looking at this thing being right about 14, to 15 inches. It's a 10-inch cutting edge, right? And you have roughly 5/8 of an inch of ricasso, and then so if you just round that to an inch, just round it up to an inch, it's easy figuring then. And then about 4 inches of tang. Now this is a 3/4 tang that we're doing. It's not a through tang. With a through tang, you wouldn't need to put a pin in it because the compression of your stud on the back of your tang being hammered over into a rivet head or into a whatever flathead, whatever you want to call it, would be all the securing you need. Now you put glue and stuff or epoxy and everything in there, but everything else will be good to go. Um, hey Morgan, so we're gonna cut roughly two 10-inch pieces here, roughly, which is basically what I have right now. Maybe this is probably closer to probably 9 inches. That'd be more than enough because we're gonna draw out the nose and we're gonna draw out the tang. We're gonna have more than enough to get our 10-inch buoy nut. Make another cutoff wheel here. Oh. Now, give you guys a little homework for yourself while you're waiting for me to cut this. If you Google Jim Bowie's fighting knife, it doesn't really come up because it's not extravagant. But if you see depictions, and they're just drawings from papers and everything at the time, you'll notice that he's not depicted with what we see as the Bowie today. He's depicted with a different knife. And I'll explain what that knife was and what the knife is that we all recognize kind of as the Bowie today. The one we're doing today, the Southwestern style Bowie, is probably the most authentic, quote unquote, Bowie. That's what happens when your blade comes apart. Safety glasses. Once again, that's also a reason why you don't stand behind your tool. Stand off to the side of it. And actually, I decided we're just going to do one of these. because I don't now. If I would do 2 of these if I was just concentrating on doing the build, but with talking and everything going on, we're gonna try and keep everything from falling apart. This 5160 will break down relatively quick under high heat. And so, and let's see, where is my pair of tongs? So this is roughly 1 inch, 1.5 inches or 1.5 inches. It's 3/8 by 10, give or take. This is a 6-inch face. That's pretty close to 4 inches hanging off the edge there, by 10 inches. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna stick this in the fire and we're gonna start drawing this down and out. Now, we're gonna start with the nose. It's gonna get fat and then work off of that nose. We'll get the nose in first, and then we'll do everything else. So let's talk a little bit about Jim Bowie and the knife his namesake knife. Now, the Jim Bowie that everybody loves to make and everybody loves to carry is not necessarily the Bowie that he gained notoriety for. Because before he was famous, he was notorious. Let's put it that way. He was a knife fighter, frontiersman, jack of all trades, in a time where you had to do what you had to do and not a lot of money floating around. And so his knife that he fought with, now this is all prior to Alamo and him being, super famous, was a butcher knife. No guard, no nothing. There's sometimes it's depicted as a fat-nosed upturned, that the like has that big upturned, kind of a buffalo butcher style butcher knife, thin and not a lot of weight to it because they got to be fast. A lot of slicing. What everybody wants to think about knife fighting is that there was a lot of weight put on stabbing. That wasn't the case. Knife fighting was about slashing and cutting, and a lot of times it never went to the death. It was to first blood. So it didn't need to be a huge mortal or a fatal wound. You just had to cut them. So it was less about stabbing and more about drawing blood. So you just had to have something that could cut, something that was sharp. And so having something that was stabbing, because a lot of times these were done as it was kind of a sport, they won money, they won fame, and it was not necessarily to the death. That's what you had sidearms for, right? That's what you had guns for. You'd go out and have a duel. That was to the death. Knife fighting was more of a sport. It was first blood. And so you didn't want to have or need to have a knife with a point on it. And so the butcher knife, if you look at some of the old woodcuts and drawings from back in the day, the newspapers and some of the dime novel stuff, you won't recognize the Jim Bowie fighting knife as a Bowie, because it's not. It was a weapon of convenience and choice at the time. And it wasn't until Bowie became famous for being a fighter that he got the knife that we all know and love today. Now, I'm not a big fan of Bowie's actually, but they are fun to make. They're big. They're not necessarily heavy. They should be wieldable and balanced. Um, they should be kind of point heavy, um, and so that you can slice and hack, and they would go deep. They're meant for exactly what they look like. They're meant for causing devastation, and so that is their only real job in life. They're not meant for hunting. They're not meant for camping. They're meant for killing shit. And they're a last ditch effort. Um, so, but if you look at Jim Bowie's knife from depictions and pictures of him going into the Alamo, right? And there are a few out there. The Southwestern Bowie is probably the closest Bowie that you could make to making an authentic Bowie. Um, Now, we're going to be doing the more stylized hidden tang or three-quarter tang based on the drawing I got from David Roeder. He's the one that chose this project for me from the fan group. And it has a pin in it, three-quarters of the way down. So it's a pin three-quarter tang with a butt cap and a fastener on it, so and a little rounded finial on it. Well, if you have, like I was saying earlier, there's no reason to have a pin if it's a complete through tang, right? Because you're going to have glue, you're going to have, and then that mechanical connection, because you're upsetting that pin on the end of your tang up around the butt plate. So um, we're gonna build it how I interpret that drawing that he sent me. So I have some Damascus floating around here we've been working on. We're gonna cut it up. We're gonna use that for the butt plate and the guard. The guard is going to be an S guard with spherical finials on the end of it. Um, it'll be have a short guard up top and a long swooping guard around the handle that is about 5/8 of the handle itself. And then the pin will be in the backside of the tank. Normally, I put a pin up close to within that bolster area range, but we're going to do it exactly like David Roeder drew it up. He's the one that chose this for me. It has lots of cool parts, lots of good stuff. And we're also going to have a copper spacer in there up next to the guard. So it'll go guard, spacer. We're going to do black walnut with a copper pin, and Damascus butt plate with a copper connection center finial point on there. Because there's absolutely no reason. So that it's all going to be decorative, but it'll be fastened on. So we're going to have to do some once we get it sanded down to size. We're going to have to start with prior to that. We're going to have to start with a relatively large block of wood, and we're going to insert pins up into the butt plate that go into the handle that you'll never see. They'll be epoxied, and most likely I was thinking of tack welding them in there from the backside and then sliding them into their individual holes. You'd only need like maybe 2 or 3 of them to really fasten that on. It would be easier just to do a through tang, but that's not what the drawing says. And when I poked around at David, he didn't say I wasn't correct. So he's wanting me to interpret what he drew and what he chose and kind of figure it out on my own, which is fine. there's a multitude of ways to attach that butt plate to where it's fixed and it won't come off. Uh, Period. So you could even do it as you still have your pin in there and put a piece of weld a piece of you know scrap steel to the bottom of your tang and have it pop out the end of it as well. That's another way to do it, but we're not doing it that way. I'm not going to do. There's not going to be any kind of thread. It's just going to be kind of the quickest way possible of doing it. Now, this knife would have most likely had a coffin handle, and you can also look that up online. You can see them. Um, and the Bowie wasn't the Bowie. It's almost called a ceremonial Bowie. It's the one that he's known for, the big flashy one, but it's clunky. And it's depicted. I mean, I know what it could be used for, but it really doesn't make a lot of sense to have that type of blade in that type of combat situation. Even carrying it, I mean, even in regular combat, modern day combat, you don't have these gigantic knives that are unwieldy and they're going to get caught on stuff. You want stuff that is sharp, fast, and ready to go. So, you know, the K bar is still only like 7 inches long. You know, cutting edge, and the Marine Corps fighting knife, and then the paratrooper knife is the same thing. It's a relatively light fighting knife, but also very very utilitarian when it comes to its uses. So okay, we're on our first heat here. We're gonna the first heat. We're gonna flatten everything out, take everything out, and I chose to use the big 132 pounder today, mainly for the fact that we're going to be using the big, the giant new toy that we got from Dan Bly today, and which is this guy right here. I'll just put it up here. Our big guillotine fuller, and that's what we're going to use to set our tang here later on. Now we're probably going to have two. I know on the schedule, I think it had me doing kind of fit up, dry fit, maybe some profile grinds here this afternoon or this evening. But I think we're going to be moving into more still forging this bad boy to get it done. But we have 2 days. Now, just like I normally do, we're going to forge in. I know a lot of guys, they forge in the spine, right? Like it's the tip, and then flip it over and hammer it back the other way. I don't do that. So we got some fish lipping going on right there. So next time I'm gonna turn it up, I'm gonna hammer down on that, upset that back into itself. And once we get our tip in, I can come back off of that, knowing that I'm gonna be stretching it out farther for that gigantic clip on there. Look up this. the Jim Bowie Southwestern knife on Google, and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a big old nasty clip with a relatively large false edge or a swage on it. They call it a swage, false edge. And then we'll get our ricasso, come back, hit the ricasso, jump back about 5/8 of an inch, hit our tang, and we'll be golden. So knowing that we don't need a lot of metal to do our tang with this, we only need approximately about 4 inches of actual tang. And this is 3/8. So, I mean, we're going to be going down. I want a final thickness forged of a brown 3/16. That's, to me, is going to give a very nice blade weight. Hey now. I took the magnet off the heel of this, so I apologize for that little bit of ring in there. I may go put it back on. Actually, I am going to put it back on. These are gigantic magnets. There we go. No more ring. So we have more than enough steel here to get an oversized representation of what our end product is going to be. Because I'm going to build it bigger than what I need it and then grind it, the profile down to where I need it within reason. I think he said 10 inches cutting edge, 1 3/4 blade height. We have almost a complete flat grind to the from the edge to the spine. About a 5/8 of an inch ricasso with an angled back of the cutting edge leading in the ricasso with a rounded. It's not a sharp corner. It's slightly rounded on that bottom piece. going to get this clip hammered in over top of our horn here before we drop back, because I want a good, relatively within where we want it before we drop back and measure our cutting edge. And it's straight line distance, so you actually have more cut in an upturned blade. You actually have more cutting edge than what's measured, because you're just going a straight line distance from tip to the plunge line. And I actually only measure just the cutting edge. So a lot of people go from tip to plunge line. I go from tip to cutting edge, because like in this instance, the plunge line is about 3/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch farther back than our actual cutting edge. Sneeze. Hey, morning, Darren. So we're going to turn this over our horn and hammer down on our nose. That's going to make something that looks really weird at first. But that's okay. It'll get there. Trust me. Trying to take it back to the original thickness every time. So 3/8. Right now it looks like a really big cheese knife. Or an Arabian something or other. So there's Bowie knives they fall in that category of politics and religion a lot of times. The arguments of what is a Bowie, what isn't a Bowie, is huge. But if you look at Bowie through the ages, a lot of them were pretty small. And these are like knives that were made relatively close to when Bowie was alive, within 15, 20 years. And there's a few of photos out there of Bowie that is basically carrying and posing with a hunter. So everybody likes to think they know what they're talking about, but in reality, you could go through every picture of Bowie and make probably 3 or 4 different knives and them all still be Bowies. But the one that everybody looks at is big old clip on the front of it, what we call a California clip. It's very flashy, false edge coming up that. Big wide blade, something that is very cleaver-esque. All right. You take this nose now and hammer it down. It's also a really great way to draw out your nose for a regular knife. It's over the horn, and if we're making a regular knife, and then straighten it back out. You get a lot of upset. And that's basically all we're going to do right now to that nose. We have a nice looking clip on it. Maybe come over the horn a little bit more real quick. You just drive that down, that nose down a little bit more. Get a little more upturn to it. But we'll be taking a lot of that out when we do the edge, because hammering on that edge is going to create a gigantic banana. Okay, so we need, let me get my measuring stick here, measuring tool, just so I can make sure it's rough and pretty close to where we need it to be. Doesn't have to be spot on or super accurate. Okay. I'm going to start my ricasso at 8 inches. Okay, so right there. Kind of just eyeballing it. Well, there's no kind about it. I am eyeballing it. Now, this isn't going to be like forge thick, grind thin. This is going to be, I'm going to forge this to finish and then hit it with the grinder. So I'm going to turn down my forge here so we don't overheat this. Now I will do a reforge. So here pretty soon, when we get this all to within pretty close to parameters, probably going to go almost to a 2-inch blade height and then grind it back and get everything just really humongous, blown up to where it's really large. And then we will do our profile, then a reforge to knock down the hard edges from the grind. And I will probably, might even try and leave that forge along the spine, that forge finish along the spine, because there is a little sliver of David's drawing to where the plunge line comes up, stops about 3/16 of an inch from the spine, and feathers out along that spine. So you're going to get the ricasso will be forge finish, and that line that shoots down the spine will be forge finish. Everything else will be flat ground to the spine. Then we'll have this finished edge before sharpening will be about 1/8 of an inch. So I want a 3/16. Let's see here. We're going to do 3/16. Yeah, 3/16 spine, give or take. Probably closer to 1/4 inch. And then, because you're going to take a flat grind off towards the nose, 1/8 inch finished blunt edge, and then we'll turn that into our final cutting edge and put our geometry in that. We'll grind into the final edge geometry when everything else is done. Should do this on the press. Be a whole lot easier. To press in our ricasso at least. But we'll hand it. We'll do one. This other piece that's on the it's on in the vise right now. We'll save that one and forge another one of these with the press. But we'll do this first one with just a hammer. So even with the press, you're still using a hammer. Don't let it. I want to get that confused with. Well, you're not going to use a hammer at all. No, you do use a hammer. Now that would have been done in one heat with the press. Remember, this isn't the tang. This is the ricasso. The tang starts, you shoulder up the tang after the ricasso. And we're shooting for 5/8 of an inch for that ricasso. We'll turn it up just because I'm running a little low on this big tank. Now we have this marked out. I'll come back, spine down, and we'll hammer in that ricasso. It'll be a messy transition right now, but once we get the edge geometry put in, or the blade geometry, I should keep on saying edge. The edge geometry comes with the grinder, but we'll do the blade geometry on the sides with a hammer. So, okay, this will not be a forge thick, grind thin. So I want to talk about while this is heating up, I'm going to be starting a video series that I'll start filming next week. It will be called Becoming a Blacksmith / Bladesmith. And we will start as if I'm going to pick a corner of the shop, and that's where the filming will go for the first couple episodes. And we will build a quick, economical forge that just gets stuff done. Ideally, I would build an earthen charcoal forge, but propane's cheap, and it's cheaper when you talk about fuel consumption than let's say, charcoal or coal. Now, if you have coal readily available, like if you're down south, Virginia, that area, where it's just kind of laying around and you can go pick it up, by all means, build a coal forge. And you can pretty much do the same thing that I'm going to show you with an earthen forge, coal forge, where you use a brake drum in the ground with some piping and a hair dryer. I'm doing kind of the same thing, but with gas, and I'm going to be doing the quickest burner possible. It's the same burner that we use on the vertical forges. I'm not gonna nozzle it. It's just going to be straight propane dump. Um, Less parts, and with a hair dryer. And this will be centered around quick builds so you can get going. Won't have an anvil. I have a giant tent stake, almost a circus tent stake hammer that will be the anvil, and that's how I'm going to make stuff for the first couple episodes is, and then we'll grow through that. We'll make our first tools, and then we'll build a bigger forge, and we'll get, a bigger anvil, and I have multiple anvils at multiple prices, price points and everything. So I'll be able to give a good representation of what I want to show you and how cheap that you can keep it, and still put out really high quality stuff. We'll start with the floor sanders and stuff like that, and the 1x30s. I have a few working ones still that we'll put up, showing that you don't need to have um, a drill press. Just use a drill. You don't need to have a big 2x72 grinder. The biggest tools that you'll need, we'll go over. Um, and you'll go and buy most of it from Harbor Freight. There's one tool especially that I will highly suggest every beginner gets, because it's two tools in one. I'm going to use the other tongs for this. So Ricasso, I went down this way last time, coming up, spine down, and hammering that transition. The Ricasso area down. We'll clean it up later. Now I'm going to have some cutoff for this. I'm going to have a drop, because I don't need that much tang material. So there's the Ricasso roughed in. Now you might think, well, so we're going to go to, working the tang. No, we want to get a good transition right now between the end of your cutting edge and that Ricasso. So we want a good hard corner there. So now that I have it good and set, we're going to put it back over the edge of the anvil and come down again to make your right angle. Now, like I said, if I was doing this on the press, would have been already done. We've been on the next one. Press doesn't make you better. It makes you faster. Remember that. You can go buy all the big boy toys all you want, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're just gonna, for one, you're gonna break shit. For two, you're gonna make shit. Plain and simple. Big tools do not make you better. They make you faster. And that's what I hope to show in my Becoming a Blacksmith / Bladesmith series, is that you can have the not so good shop. I'm going to be doing inside my shop, probably over in that corner over there. But you don't have to have a lot to do a lot. Some people think you got to have that all accomplished smiths have just extravagant shops. They don't. Some smiths don't even have a shop. They have to borrow space or trade knowledge, pay rent through teaching, to a person that does have a good shop. So don't judge a smith based on where they're working. Judge them based on what they put out. Quality of work is what's important. I bring that up because I had a potential student who showed up but looked at my shop and drove off. His wife was really excited about it. He was really excited about coming. Showed up to the shop and took one look and was like, I ain't going in there. Judged me by the way my shop looks. And, whatever. So he's not blacklisted. And not just from me, from other people as well. But you don't have to have all the tools to do good work. And that's what we're going to show when you can use the simplest of equipment to put out high quality work. It all comes down to the knowledge in here, not the tools out here. Okay, so we are going to we're going to do this. Now this is the first time we're going to be using our new toy here. I have multiple versions of these. I built multiple versions of these, but this one was commissioned from Dan Bly. You guys will know him as the owner-operator of P&W Metal and Wrenches on Facebook. And no pricing on this yet. We did a direct trade. So right now, I traded in my $150 hammer for this. So that's where this guy is sitting. This one's built for large anvils. And we're going to run it through its paces. Probably going to need to put a strike plate up here, but I think we'll be good for what we're going to be doing. He told me to try and break it, and so that he can get a good feel for what it needs to be done. I'm also going to be having him make one that has the ability to take your plates from this configuration and run them this way as well, so that you can run fullers on blades. This one was originally designed. I said, hey, can you make one of these for me? So I can do big hammers with. And this is what he came up with. I love it. I love how big it is. So we're going to put it through his paces and just see what we get. So now we're going to be setting our shoulders for our tang. Knowing that this is pretty thick still, and we're going to be forging this down, we're going to come in pretty close to our transition from blade to ricasso. Yeah, just like I thought, we're going to need to have some strike plates on here, but for the right now, I'm not going to worry about it. Normally, this is going to be up like that high, right? So we got lots of room to play with on this big plate. And these are consumables anyways, these plates, the die plates and everything for the, and the fullering plates for these, they're a consumable piece. But what I'm going to end up doing after today, I'll end up welding a piece of 5/8 square up here, and that'll be my strike plate. So we're knocking out a lot of the main aspects of this knife. We got our clip roughed out, our point roughed out, the back edge of our blade roughed out of the cutting edge, the ricasso roughed out, and now we're working on the shoulders that transition from the ricasso into the tang. And then we'll draw out the tang. We'll cut some of this off, and I'll make that drop into something. But being how thick it is, you have to be cognizant of where you are, where your tooling is set up, so that you're not making it so big because you forgot that you have all this extra thickness in there that you have to work out. And that's about it. That's about all we're going to do right there. Just marking it up. So we didn't get a lot of work on this guy, but he will get his fair share of work once I get a couple more hammers put together. So now we're going to come back with our tongs, our 3-pound rounding hammer, and we're going to start drawing out that tang. Now I cut this amount of steel, 10 inches of 5160, knowing I was not going to need it at all. So, but you can cut it at 8 inches and forge the rest. When we do this next one, what I'll do is I'll cut it at 8 inches because I have a feeling I'm gonna cut about 2 inches of this steel off, and we'll forge the rest of it. We'll forge that completely out to where we want it, thickness wise and everything. Using a hammer, we're probably gonna do the clip on the anvil for the next one, but the main shaping and everything for that blade will be done on the press. And that's going to be that'll be a Coffin Tang. It has lots of pins in it, but it'll also have a guard on it. So how you make those is that you have your ricasso, and then you have a step down, right? That step down is no bigger, and it's actually the same height as the max height at the back of your tank. So you can slide your guard on, right? And then everything else gets put to that. Now, there's not much dive in off of that coffin back. So you only want a 1/16 of an inch difference between that portion up next to where the bolster, right up next to where the guard is, and the back of your knife, the palm of your knife, or the coffin, where the coffin shape is. That's just the way I would do it. Now, David Roeder and Mike Rowley and Chad Osborne and Darren Hunter might tell you different. Actually, I guarantee you they'll tell you different. They make more of this style of with guards and everything than I do. So you're probably thinking, well, how would what are you gonna do about the gap you're gonna see on that step, the guard? Well, what I would do, I would probably slide a thin piece of leather up against it, that you'd have a leather ring in between the spacer in between the guard and the scales that would cover everything, and it would look really good as well. And actually, I'm probably going to end up going, looks to me, about only an inch cut off. So maybe, we'll see. There's a lot of material here. A lot. So we want final thickness. We got to lose. We're at 3/8. We want 3/16. Everybody knows that one more 16th is a 1/4 inch. So we're going to take this down. We're at 3/8 right now. We're going to lose a 1/4 to get to, we're going to lose an 1/8 to get to 1/4, and another 16th to get to 3/16. So we have lots and lots and lots and lots of steel to move around to get our final measurements. And normally I wouldn't even measure. Normally I just place it up there, and it's all by feel and eye, and there's no real rhyme or reason to the madness. I'm not a big scientific. I am a scientific guy, but not when it comes to blacksmithing. So let's break out where's the other hammer at? There she is. Let's break out the straight peen / rounding hammer. We're going to create our back on here where I know I know we're not going to need all this metal. So I am going to go about 2 inches on here. We do not need all that steel. We're actually going to go cut this off. My hot cut's not repaired yet. So we'll just cut this off with the angle grinder. Because we do not need all that steel. Let me tell you what, it would be way easier to throw this in the press, but I'm not going to. All right, we roughly chopped off about 2 inches. Now we're going to start drawing this tang out. And we're probably going to end up losing more of the tang as we go on. I want to get the camera back over here. More of the tang as we go on, just because of, forging out, and it may not be exactly the thickness we want it. May go smaller through heats. You got to know that that's a possibility. But you don't need a bunch of big shoulders on there. David Roeder, I hated making hidden tangs and through tangs because they were just all the ones I'd ever seen made. And there's knife guys out there right now that all they make is stick tangs. And there's just no stability in the handle at that point. None whatsoever. And David Roeder showed me a good way of doing it, the way he does it. And so the tang you guys will see, and the tang you see most often with me, is all because of David Roeder. And, showing me how to do it, because I just would not make one. And he says, you don't need all that shoulder there. Just need just enough to catch. And it makes sense. You don't need it all. And you don't need, and it makes a very, very strong knife, is what I'm trying to say, the way he does it. Even though it's hidden tang or partial tang or 3/4 tang or through tang, the big wide piece up in the bolster coming off the steps, those small steps down to that tang, make the knife very, very comparable to a full tang knife. Those that have presses can attest that, man, once they got the press, it was real hard to flesh one of these babies out with a hammer when that press is sitting there, and you can get on to the next steps a whole lot faster. But I think it's important that people understand that a lot of smiths don't have these big tools. A lot of smiths don't have the big forges, or can build their own stuff. They rely on everybody else to do it, to build the tools for them. And if they can't afford it, they just go without. And so don't just assume that big knife that you couldn't, or that sword that you couldn't fathom somebody hammering out, right? Don't assume that they didn't. They could have hours upon hours and days upon days of forging that piece, and you think that it took them a couple hours to do because of the quality of work, and it could have taken them weeks to get it to that point, or months. So don't assume that bigger tools. This leads back. I can't say it enough. That the bigger tools, the better tools, the heavier tools that allow you to get stuff done quicker is what allows you to make a better product, because that is not the case. You have to have what's up here first, time behind one of these, because I treat my press like I'm wielding a hammer. I do the same shit, and I'm still wielding a hammer in between presses, straightening out, doing stuff that I can't do in a press, stuff like that. You still have to have the know-how. A green smith could not come in here and I have a power hammer and a press, and they jump on those tools and make work like I make, or make quality work like David Roeder makes, or Mike Rowley, or whatever, or Darren Hunter. The tools do not make the smith. Time, blood, sweat, and tears. Granted, some people pick up the techniques quicker than others. So you can have a very accomplished smith that is still very young in years when it comes to working behind an anvil or working in a shop. You can have a guy, and I know a good many of them, where they only have maybe 5 or 6 years in the trade, but they've already surpassed me in ability, and it's just they've dedicated. They're either strictly blacksmithing, and so they do more blacksmithing, or strictly bladesmithing, and they do everything bladesmithing. I do kind of everything, and jack of all trades, master of none type of deal. So there is another thing is to everybody out. Well, how many years have you been doing this? Well, I've been doing it for going on 11 years, and that sells people a lot of times, but don't base everything off of that, because you could have a very, very talented, knowledgeable smith that maybe has 4 years in the trade, and they have thrown their entire life at this thing, and they're just that good. There are people that are like that. It's another thing. Don't let somebody prove that they don't deserve your adoration. Don't just assume. Starting to come together, starting to look like a knife-shaped object. I'm going to move up into the main body from the tang. We're going to use Bertha here to get this down in thickness so that it starts becoming easier to forge and move around. I'm not too worried about parameters right now because I already know this thing's going to be way larger than what we want it to be. I'm going to get it to thickness, which is going to get me over the size I want. And then we'll profile grind. Then we'll forge down the bevels. And I'll forge my bevels, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand cut my plunge lines in. I'll file in my plunge lines. That way, when I go to the grinder, there's no doubt about those plunge lines. I mean, I can get them close. I can get them real close so they look identical. But we're going to go, we're going to pull every tool out of the old toolbox for this build right here. I gotta go get some black walnut done up and everything, and make sure that's ready to go. That'll be some of the behind the scenes stuff that I may film, but nobody will get to see except for maybe Patreon members. We're at about 1/4 inch thickness going from the tang into the ricasso, into the back part of the blade. We need to come down another 1/16. Got a hole in my slack tank. Let me put more water in it. Maybe melt some wax over top of the hole. Or I could just weld it. Turn the welder way down. What time is it? Let's see here. 9:30, 9:27. Gotta go play bus driver here pretty soon. So I'm thinking we're going to need probably both live shows today to be able to forge this out. Now, this isn't necessarily a copy job, but I'm trying to stick with the parameters that David Roeder set, the basic parameters, and the look of it that he drew. And tomorrow, I'll show you that drawing. We'll get up here on the board and we'll draw it out and show you what he did. Mine's gonna have a little bit more of a clip to it. I'm thinking, but it may not. As soon as I get it down to size. I just want to get some of these bows taken out before I move on to profile. And it's important that you keep your piece pretty straight throughout the process, because then you get a really good idea of where you're at in your build. I mean, if it doesn't matter to you, then don't. But I tend to have a better smithing session and hit the high points that I need to hit if I keep it straight, not a lot of bows, and I forge back and forth. So I'm really kind of all over the place right now because I'm seeing the knife and seeing where it's moving and saying, okay, I need to straighten the profile out here so I can still keep it in my mind while I'm doing it, because I don't have a drawing to place it off of. I have a drawing that I looked at on my phone, but I didn't really try and recreate it. I did make one before I got the drawing on my graphic program, but it's my representation of what his is, and that's probably what I'm forging right now. Less of what David Roeder put, and more of my own drawing. So I was looking at this, and I have a little bit more clip than I want. So I'm upsetting it back into itself. So I can make a shorter clip. And this thing will look really weird before we go to grind, because I'm going to make that clip's going to be really blowing out in proportion. The blade itself will be really tall. We're pushing 2 inches right now, and we still have a lot of thickness to play with, especially in that spine. It doesn't really matter what it looks like now, as long as the end product is 10-inch cutting edge. Thanks, Colin. Once again, everybody, go and visit Colin Riley. That's Germantown Forge, a young smith out of PA. He's the nephew of my buddy Justin Riley, Riley River Forge. You guys know who he is. You either met him or you've seen him on the show, on live broadcast, or you've seen him demonstrate for the floor school. We come in here and play with our Ricasso again. Get it set up. We're floating right around 1/4 inch right now, guys. Anytime, Colin. Anytime, buddy. So we're going to lose about probably a 1/2 inch on our clip, the upturn, just by the way I want the knife to look. The only thing we're not going to do, we're not going to run the spine guard, that there's like a piece of steel or a piece of brass that runs about 3/4 the length of the blade. Actually, probably about 3/4 of the length to the clip of the blade on Jim Bowie's Southwestern Bowie. So we're not going to have it entirely authentic Bowie, but that's not what the challenge was. The challenge was to build a Southwestern style Bowie, not necessarily a Jim Bowie Alamo replica, because that's the Bowie knife that everybody tries to make, or that says they make, but really they make a cleaver that has a clip on it. I mean, I've made numerous Bowies that they quote unquote fall into the Bowie category, but they're not Bowies. back to the 3-pounder here. That was a 1-pounder we were using. Not too worried about, alignment right now, or not necessarily alignment, dimensions around the tang and the shoulders. I'm just trying to get a general starting point for when we go to the grind. Stand in front of the door here. There we go. Looks like I could close down this gigantic wash here. Hey, that's better. Sunlight washes everything, even video. So sunlight does about the same thing to a camera, that glare and that wash, that it does to your steel when you're forging outside. The inside the shop with these daylight lights, they make that perfect dapple light where you can see all your colors. There's really not a shadow. If there is a shadow, it's directly beneath your piece you're working on. Put a little chamfer in this blade, in the tang here. Push it back center. We're right about where I want it to be. Lengthwise, it'll get slightly shorter. So that is the tang. So let's get over here and work on this nose and everything and see if we can't fix that up. Knowing that it's going to be ground down or some of it cut off. But actually, let's pull that back out and let's do a quick measurement here of everything. See where we're at. Right now, without our edge hammered in, we're at 1 3/4 inches. We need to go bigger, which we are going to, and then grind it back. Like I said, we're still at right around 1/4 inch. 3/16, I mean, isn't very, very thick. I think what I'm going to do actually is I'll save forging more of that tip in until after we get some of the other parameters met and ground in. Let's just check a length of, okay, we still have a ways to go on that, but that'll be fine. I'm gonna hammer that tip down just a little bit more. We're sitting at 9. That extra inch will be easy to get. I'll show you how here in a minute. I'm going to take that clip completely out in this heat, and here's why. I was forging it in mainly at this stage, and it makes more sense to do it right now this way to get a look at the overall profile of the blade, right? So I'm going to forge it all the way out, check our length. So I'm just going to knock it flat. It's going to be just a flat clip on it, and we'll get it forged out, and then we'll slightly hammer in the nose a little bit, and it will, look how it's supposed to look. I mean, it doesn't have to be that crescent moon look. It can just be the tip, upward tip is just gradually coming back in, almost like a Nike swoosh, but the bottom side of it, right? Or as the Brits say it, a Nike, because that's how it's spelled. Where'd that hammer go? Where'd my hammer go? Ah, hiding in my bucket. Okay, we're gonna hammer that down. Upsetting the tip. That's really close to what the original Bowie really looked like. Real close to it. Okay. We have a ways to go, but we have a lot of thickness to play with. So let's get that thickness out. We're gonna heat this up, and we're gonna dog's head this. Spread this bad boy out. So we're gonna spread this out and then squish it down. Spread it out, squish it down. But we're gonna do it with a dog's head. Do it in a controlled manner. Very flat surface face on this hammer. I mean, stopping right now would make a really nice knife, but parameters. We won't do, I apologize, we won't dog's head the profile. We just dog head the flats. We'll use the workhorse hammer to do profile. So by lengthening it and shortening the height, or by hammering the sides, let's start over. By hammering on the flats and then hammering on the profile, you're lengthening it. You're pushing it out and pushing it away. Out and away. Now, if I was a forged thick grind thin, I'd be almost done with this. I'd be, just about ready to go to the grinder and never come off the grinder until it was time for heat cycling. Well, that's not true. I'd go to the grinder, get off what I needed to get off, heat cycle it, stamp it, whatever you need to do, quench it, and probably grind it hard if I had fresh belts. Get a cleaner grind when you grind hard. But I'll do I'll do my normal process that I do when I have used belts. We're going to do one more profile hammering on this thing. We're going to go on the spine side. Okay, we're going to go back to the dog's head. Ah. Yeah, because we'll probably need all of today to get this ready to go for handle and fittings tomorrow. Might be able to get to the fittings today. Maybe we can get them rough forged out. Build a drift for everything. So I have to build a drift. I mean, I could file it all in, but I think I'll forge the slot in for our guard, and then we gotta get the Damascus dug out and get that prepped. We'll do that here today. Get it cut up. It's already in billet form. It's that one big billet I've been working with. I figured why not. And it's if it didn't hold together, you know, it's whatever. I'll grab some. I have some steel out there right now that David Roeder brought over. It's a mild steel that'll make a great guard, and forge those finials on it. Get it all forged out, and then it'll be a compression fit. So I'll offset my pinhole to where it pulls everything in, and then I don't know. I keep on looking at that picture in my head, and I'm thinking maybe I should do a through tang and still use an offset pin to pull everything tight, and then do the hammer that the end of the tang over to hold the butt cap on. I think that might be the easiest way to do it, and I would still accomplish what he wanted me to do. I would just do it in a way that I find easier. Let's do some more dog's heading, get that spread out. We're very close. Probably do the profile grinding off camera. You don't need to see that. So I'll do the profile grinding before we do the actual blade geometry going into the edge. Forge in all the bevels and everything like that. almost to that 10-inch mark. And we are sitting right around 1 7/8 inches, which is where I wanted it to be. Now you may be thinking, well, that's not grossly oversized, but it really is. Okay. We're going to go along that spine again. We kind of a bow in it, a bow this way. I want to draw that out. And, well, I can do it this way. We can do it this way. We can just tap and then go along the spine. Come back across the center. Let's dog's head this tang really quick when we do this next heat. And we're still a little bit thicker than 3/16. Now I will admit, I am not a fan of these clip points. I'm just not a fan. I normally forge one in to a blade, and then I grind it completely off. I'm just not a fan of them. I like a flat clip. I don't like the upturned or with the California clip. The only reason they call it California clip, I imagine, is because it has flare. I like a flat clip on them. But a lot of people like them that way, and hopefully this guy sells. When this guy gets done, be about an $800 job. We'll put it up on the site, and we'll, or it might be I might auction it off on eBay. Who knows? If I had some antler that had the right bend in it, I'd use some elk antler for the handle, but I don't have any. I have antler. It's just not the right diameter and the right bends. And I mean, I could boil it, make it soft, put it in a jig, and make it bend the way I want it to bend. But I'll just use wood. It's gonna look good. Okay, we're going to come back along the edge this next heat. I got a thick part on the edge right in the middle. You want to hammer that. I'm going to hammer our clip in a little more. With our 1-pounder. So we're going to take and lift that up, and we're going to be hammering it into it like that. $10.07. Okay. Just a little clip. It's going to look really dumb, but it'll look better when I'm done with it. It just gives me a look for when I go to profile this. And I can always upset this back into itself too. Use what I don't need. That's the beauty of being a smith, is that I can put that clip in and then move the steel exactly where I want it to be for the type of knife that I'm making. And so what that clip told me there, if I hammered it back in, was that my point was too high. It needs to finish a lot lower. I'm coming at it pretty aggressively to upset that steel back into itself and move that tip back up into the spine. I don't want to move it down into the blade. Move it up into the spine because the blade is already going to get longer, the blade side, because I'm hammering my bevels in. So I need that material in the spine side. Woo! Excuse me. I'm going to take a look at the picture real quick here. And yeah. So almost like a sax to begin with. And then when I hammer that edge side, it's going to go whoop. I think I need to come down a little bit. I'm going to put my own little flair on this. I like a blade, a big blade that builds towards the belly, and so it's slightly smaller height-wise next to the plunge line, and it builds to the belly, and then goes back smaller on the point. My personal preference. It'll still be a southwestern Bowie. It'll still have all the parameters set by David, being the tallest point of the blade being 1.75 inches, but it'll have what I like in a blade of this length. I'm going to force these bevels in real quick. I'm tired of looking at it like it is and second guessing myself, making sure I have the right profile and everything pre-profile grind. I need to just hammer it out and take a look at it. This is the hard part about doing a piece from a drawing or a reproduction, is that if it looks weird, it's not going to sell. If it doesn't look like what it's supposed to be, then you're screwed. If I'm just doing a one-off piece, I just make it however the hell I want it to be. Look, put the Bowie characteristics in it, but, you know, do it how I want to make it, how I want it. It's looking a little better with those bevels in there. So I kind of knew it was going to, right? run my forge just a little bit. Now we're going to come across, we walk those bevels up about an inch. Now we're going to come across the flat of the spine and walk that spine up even farther. Now I'm not going to go all the way out to the tip. I'm just going to go where the clip starts. I want that spine to rise up above the clip and above the point. Now I'm going to grind a little bit on it, so the point's going to be lower than the spine, but I want that spine to rise up. Come across the middle. Hammering into the spine. Now we're going to finish this first forge session with working on the tang here. We've done a really good job of getting this drawn out. pre-profile grind. I'm really just kind of looking at the clip here, and it's going to line up really nice once I get it profiled out. It's going to look really good. Still pretty thick on the edge side. But we're right where we want to be. I mean, we're really not. It's looking really good. We'll know how much more if we need to go into the forge for a heavy forge session tonight on Patreon after I get it profiled out. Get a really good look at the thicknesses, where it's thinner, where it's thicker, how far can we go down on this type of deal, and really get it where we need to go. Now, it's going to go through an annealing cycle here from when I shut this live feed off till 5 p.m. tonight. Well, till when it's fully cooled where I can touch into a profile grind on it for the 5 p.m. tonight. Right now, I'm just making sure the tang is the same thickness as the spine, the main meat of the knife, so that we have a consistent thickness all the way through. And I think I am going to do a through tang design with the pin like David wanted. Okay, folks. There it is. Looks kind of weird to me right now, but if it looks weird to me, I know it looks weird to you. We'll get this thing pre-ground for tonight's show on Patreon. We're going to let this thing cool down. And I'm going to go play bus driver. I'll come back for lunch, but for the most part, I won't get back here. I won't get back here in the shop till probably 4:30. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Once again, this is a Southwestern style Bowie. It is the style of Bowie that Jim Bowie is known for and he's only really known for it because of, Alamo and shit like that. Jim Bowie's real knife was not the Bowie we know today. It didn't have a guard. It was basically a butcher knife. And everybody thinks, oh, it has to have this point because it was a fighter. Well, the knife fighting back in the day, like I was saying, was done to first blood more often than not, and it was a sport. It was a contest, and so it was a way for you to win money, right? And that's what Bowie, how he became famous, was being just this outstanding fighter. And then making a knife and having it made, and putting this extravagant piece that became the Bowie. The Bowie that you see in the pictures with him is not a fighter. It is It's a war piece. It is meant for hacking because I mean you got to remember at that time we didn't have repeaters in 1836. Around the 1830s, we didn't have repeating right. We didn't have the repeaters. It was black powder, single shot. Musket style shooting. We didn't even have we didn't have revolvers weren't even plentiful. If even around revolvers came closer to the Civil War and that area. Now, if I'm wrong, feel free to scream at me, whatever. But and so having a big war knife, which is what the Bowie was a war knife. Um, when all else fails, type of deal, and you gotta wade in, and it's time to do freaking growing up shit. That's why you have some why he had that. And it's turned into this giant cult following that is pretty outstanding. And I know of people where they make a pretty good living at just making Bowie style knives. Like I said, not my favorite thing to do. It's a fun forge. It's a great if you're a blacksmith or a bladesmith and you do and you forge all your stuff. It is a fun forge. Let me tell you what, it is fun to make. Lots of smithing involved, and you take a little bit of steel. Now I could have done with a little bit less steel. Um, I went with about an inch and a half uh, wide by 10 inches long and by 3/8. So I could have probably gone maybe an inch and a quarter wide by probably 9 inches long, and got the piece that I wanted, out of it. But it's okay to have some drops. We don't need to. This 5160 is readily available, and you know, and so it's not like I need to covet this stuff. So I don't mind dropping, and that little piece that we dropped off will make something out of. But we're gonna be back here at 5 o'clock tonight, after I get done working out, and we will go and finish this up and get it. Well, I want to hopefully get it ready so where we can start working on handle stuff up there tomorrow, and we'll the guard, the spacer, get the copper ready for the copper spacer, get the guard ready, get the butt plate ready, and we are going to then forge this out into a through tank. So, but it'll be a different type. It'll have a pin in there. It'll have a compression pin that'll have to really press down to get the holes lined up, push that through, and how I'll probably end up doing that is I'll put everything together, clamp it down, and probably make one of my clamps augment them, drill a hole through it so the end of the tang goes through the hole of the clamp it down so the pin lines up, slide it through. But I won't need to do that. I'll offset the pin probably a 16th, because I'll be able to squish that much, but it'll be all at the end. So it'll be, well, while the glue is in there, we will do all that, and then while the glue is setting, we'll start peening that over. You don't need a lot, especially with a pin in there. Um, that end piece there. I mean, I could even just weld that over. If the Damascus doesn't work, I could just weld that flush, and you wouldn't even know it. Or I could thread the end there and make a thread on finial, and you wouldn't even know it, and call it good. But based on the picture that we're looking at, the pin is about 3/4 of the length of the handle material, and so it could go either way. I could do a 3/4 tang, and then spend a little bit more time fastening the butt plate and everything on there with a false um, finial type rivet head on there, or I could just go the whole shebang, put the pin in there, make it look exactly or close to what David drew, and then and call it good and just be done, knowing that that's not coming off. Period. So there's gonna be a lot of behind the scenes stuff that just it's just menial task stuff. Doesn't really need to be shown. Even in Patreon, it doesn't need to be shown. It's just cleanup. We will do a burn in on this. We'll do a burn in. We'll burn the Tang in, and then we'll go from there. So I'll build a drift for this and a burn in drift after the Tang is completely ready to go, and then we'll heat that Tang up and burn in our piece, and we'll use that same burn in drift to then drift everything else, to drift all of our other pieces, our copper, our we'll just drill a hole in the butt plate, the pommel plate, but our copper spacer we'll use the drift for, and our guard. So I know what David's looking for on this build. He's looking for fit and finish. Seeing, he said for me to do this build and drew it up the way he drew it up, so that because he's always pushing me to get better and to do things like this, and which is good. I really appreciate it. So a big shout out to David Roeder. Thanks, buddy, for pushing me to get better and to do bigger things. This build isn't a easy build. I mean, there's a lot of parts in it, and there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it to get that same look that he's going for. And he wanted to make one with me, but he has a lot of other irons in the fire. He's working on like 3 swords right now, and so maybe later on down the road we can get him to do a build um, live or filmed or whatever, or just build it and have him show just what almost a master smith can do versus a guy whose claim to fame is to be a blacksmith. So, um, but yeah, so that's cool. So I'm gonna go inside. We're gonna get ready to drop the kids off at school. You guys all take it easy. You stay safe out there. Be well. Hug the family if you got them. Get out to your forge and have some fun. If you don't have a forge and you like to get into this, stay tuned for the video series coming up on becoming a blacksmith / bladesmith. We will have very quick, easy, inexpensive ways for you to get into this craft. So those will be probably hitting the YouTube around April. So the first couple episodes around April, we're going to start shooting those next week. So we'll have some sneak peek stuff out and about, and we'll get that stuff done. So y'all take it easy, stay safe, and as always, forge on.